So, let's talk about something that's really at the heart of the opioid crisis, a medication called Suboxone. And it's a huge paradox. On one hand, it absolutely saves lives. But on the other, for a lot of people, it starts to feel like a different kind of trap. And there's really no better way to understand that tension than to hear it from someone who has actually lived through it.
Just listen to this from Stacy. She's been in recovery now for 9 years. She says, Suboxone kept me off opioids, and it kept me off heroin, and it kept me alive. But it's also another addiction. Wow. I mean, that one sentence, it just says it all, doesn't it? It's a lifeline and a leash. And digging into that duality is really the key to this whole conversation.
Okay, so let's break this down. What is this stuff really, and how in the world can it be both a lifesaver and a crutch at the very same time?
Well, Suboxone is a huge part of what's called medication-assisted treatment, or MAT. And the idea is pretty simple. You use this medication, buprenorphine, along with things like counseling and therapy. It's designed to hit the brakes on those awful cravings and withdrawal symptoms from opioids like heroin or fentanyl, but, and this is key, without giving you the high. It basically gives people a fighting chance to rebuild their lives.
And this right here is where you can see the two sides of the coin. On one side, you've got the promise, right? The ability to function, to have clarity, to literally be saved. But then there's the problem. A new dependence, the stigma that comes with it, and this feeling of leaning on a crutch. For Stacy, it was a miracle. It let her be a mom. It let her hold down a job. But at the same time, she felt completely chained to it every single day.
And you can just hear how powerful that promise was in her own words. I mean, think about it. When you're in the depths of addiction, just the ability to function, to think clearly, to show up for your family, that is everything. It is a total game changer. But here's the twist. Right as Stacy was finding her footing, the entire system built around this medication, well, it started to change dramatically.
So right around the time Stacy was starting this journey, the whole set of rules for how you get and use Suboxone was going through this massive transformation.
Just look at this timeline. It's pretty wild. Back in the early 2010s, getting Suboxone was a really involved process. We're talking in-person doctor visits, mandatory counseling, regular drug tests. It was a whole support system. Then, boom, the pandemic hits and telehealth takes over. All of a sudden, you can get prescriptions virtually. And then the big one. In late 2022, the government gets rid of something called the X waiver. This was a special license doctors needed, and once it was gone, it just opened the floodgates for way more providers to start prescribing it.
And this is exactly where things started to go wrong for Stacy. She says that with everything moving to telehealth and the rules getting looser, that whole support system she relied on just disappeared. The focus wasn't really on recovery anymore, it was just about getting the prescription filled. That accountability that was so important for her, poof, gone.
So without that oversight, you get a totally new and dangerous problem, overprescribing. Get this, Stacy was being prescribed triple the dose she was actually taking. That meant she had this huge surplus of a really valuable controlled medication that she could then sell on the street. The very treatment meant to stop addiction was now creating a supply for the black market.
And we're not talking about a small change here. The scale is just massive. A 2024 report from IQVIA found that in just 1 year after that X waiver went away, the number of providers prescribing buprenorphine shot up by 36%. So access just exploded. But the support network, the human element, that didn't grow with it. So what happens when you have this explosion in access? Well, you get this really weird, really dangerous paradox. It's like the front door to treatment was thrown wide open. But at the same time, a whole bunch of new back doors filled with problems and barriers were created.
So check this out. Even though the rules for prescribing got easier, the monitoring system started cracking down hard on the doctors and pharmacies to prevent misuse. And this research here points out something crazy. The system started seeing the prescribers themselves as the threat. And that had this chilling effect that, weirdly enough, made it even harder for people who genuinely needed the medication to get it.
And here's what that looks like in the real world. You can have a perfectly legitimate prescription, but when you get to the pharmacy, you just hit a brick wall. More than half the time, the pharmacy is just out of stock. Then you've got insurance nightmares. And almost 1 in 5 times, pharmacists are just plain suspicious because the prescription came from a telehealth appointment. They see it as a red flag.
So what we're left with is a system that feels, well, completely broken. On one hand, you've got people like Stacy who are being overprescribed with zero accountability. And on the other hand, you have people who are desperately trying to do the right thing and get treatment, but they're being blocked by a system that's terrified of its own shadow. It's failing everyone, just in different ways.
Which brings us back to Stacy. After 9 years on this medication that was both her savior and her captor, what's next for her?
Well, she's ready to move on. She's at a point where she feels like real, true recovery means finding out who she is without any crutches, without any chemical support. After nearly a decade, she's ready to see if she can walk on her own.
And this isn't something she's doing on a whim. She has a very clear, doctor-supervised plan. She's switching from those daily Suboxone strips to something called Sublocade, which is an injection. This is going to let her taper off slowly and really carefully over about 6 months. It helps her avoid those brutal withdrawals and gives her body time to recalibrate.
Stacy's journey really brings us to the biggest, most difficult question in all of this. We know this medication can save lives, but we also know it's sitting inside a system that is deeply, deeply flawed. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we build a system that can offer this lifeline, but without cutting the cord of human support and accountability that people actually need to heal for good?